For 18 months, he cursed his commander's name every single night. The constant criticism, the impossible standards, the brutal training sessions that left him bleeding in the dirt. He swore that if he ever got the chance, he'd tell that man exactly what he thought of him. Then came the mission in Kandahar, the explosion, the silence. And when he reached into his commander's torn uniform searching for dog tags, his fingers found an envelope, his name, written in shaking handwriting. Dated 3 weeks ago, he opened it, and everything he thought he knew shattered. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Veterans and Heroes Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Private Darius Kwame had been in the Army for 3 years. 3 years of following orders, completing missions, and earning the respect of his peers. But for the last 18 months, his life had become a living nightmare. Not because of the enemy, not because of the danger, but because of one man. Commander Victor Brennan. Brennan was 42 years old, a career soldier with 2 silver stars and a chest full of ribbons that told stories Darius would never hear. The commander stood 6 feet tall with shoulders that seemed carved from granite and eyes that could cut through steel. When he walked into a room, conversations died. When he gave an order, it was obeyed without question. He was respected. He was feared, and he had decided, for reasons Darius could never understand, to make Private Darius Kwame's existence utterly miserable. It started small. A critique here, a correction there. Your stance is wrong, Kwame, again. Your weapon maintenance is sloppy, do it over. Your response time is too slow, 20 more push-ups. At first, Darius thought it was normal. Commanders were supposed to be tough. They were supposed to push their soldiers. But as weeks turned to months, the pattern became impossible to ignore. While other soldiers received praise for adequate performance, Darius received criticism for excellence. While others got weekend leave, Darius got extra duty shifts. While others trained in groups, Darius trained alone under Brennan's direct supervision for hours that stretched into the night. The exercises were brutal, forced marches with weighted packs in desert heat. Navigation drills in pitch darkness without GPS, hand-to-hand combat sessions where Brennan himself would demonstrate techniques by using Darius as the practice dummy. Again, Kwame, you're too slow. Wrong, you're thinking too much. React. Pathetic. My grandmother moves faster than that. The words cut deeper than any blade. Darius was good at his job. He knew he was. His marksmanship scores were among the highest in the unit. His tactical knowledge was solid. His physical fitness exceeded standards. But none of it seemed to matter to Brennan. Nothing Darius did was ever good enough. The other soldiers noticed. Of course they noticed. Sergeant Ito Nakamura pulled Darius aside one evening after a particularly brutal training session. "What's his problem with you, man?" Nakamura asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Did you do something? Sleep with his daughter? Run over his dog?" Darius shook his head, wiping blood from a split lip. "I have no idea. I've never even had a personal conversation with the man. He just hates me." "That's not normal, brother. You should file a complaint." But Darius didn't file a complaint. Because somewhere deep inside, beneath the anger and resentment, there was a voice that whispered, "What if he's right? What if I'm not good enough? What if everything he sees in me is weakness I can't see in myself?" So Darius endured. He pushed harder. He trained longer. He followed every impossible order, completed every brutal exercise, absorbed every cutting criticism. And every night, alone in his bunk, he cursed Commander Victor Brennan with every fiber of his being. Corporal Zara Okonkwo was different from the others. She'd served under Brennan for 4 years, longer than anyone else in the unit. One night, after watching Brennan tear into Darius for a microscopic error in a routine equipment check, She approached him in the mess hall. "He did the same thing to me," she said quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. Darius looked up, surprised. Okonkwo was one of the most decorated soldiers in the company. "What?" "3 years ago. For about 8 months. Every day was hell. I thought about quitting, thought about transferring, thought about a lot of things." She paused, her eyes distant. "Then we deployed to Syria. Ambush. Bad one. I did things I didn't know I could do. Saved half my squad, and afterwards Brennan pulled me aside and said 3 words. 'Now you're ready.'" Darius stared at her. "Ready for what?" Okonkwo shrugged. "I don't know," he never explained, but I realized something that day. Every impossible scenario he drilled into me during those 8 months, I faced in that ambush. Every skill he'd beaten into my head, I used. It was like he knew exactly what was coming. "That's insane," Darius muttered. "Nobody can predict the future." "Maybe not," Okonkwo said, standing to leave, "but some people can prepare you for it anyway." She paused at the doorway. "Whatever he's doing to you, Kwame, there's a reason. I don't know what it is, but there's a reason." Darius didn't believe her. How could there be a reason for this kind of targeted cruelty? How could endless criticism and impossible standards serve any purpose except to break someone down? No, Okonkwo was rationalizing, making excuses for a commander who simply enjoyed making one soldier's life hell. The mission briefing came on a Tuesday morning. Commander Brennan stood at the front of the room, his face carved from stone as always. "Intelligence reports Taliban forces establishing a weapons cache in the Kandahar province. High-value target. We move at 04 Zanwaras tomorrow." The room buzzed with tension. This wasn't routine patrol. This was direct action, the kind of mission that made careers or ended them. Brennan's eyes swept across the assembled soldiers and landed on Darius. "Kwame, you're on point." The room went silent. Point position was leadership. Point position was responsibility. Point position was also the most dangerous spot in any formation. Darius felt every eye turn toward him. "Sir," Sergeant Nakamura interjected carefully. "Kwame's never run point on a live op before, maybe." "I didn't ask for your opinion, Nakamura." Brennan cut him off, his voice like ice. "Kwame takes point. That's final." Darius felt his stomach drop. This was it. This was how Brennan would finally get rid of him, put him in the most dangerous position on the most dangerous mission, and let the enemy do what the commander couldn't do officially. That night, Darius lay in his bunk, unable to sleep. Tomorrow he would lead soldiers into combat for the first time. Tomorrow he might die. And the man who had made his life miserable for 18 months had essentially volunteered him for it. He thought about his family back in Philadelphia, his mother who lit candles at church every Sunday, praying for his safety. His younger sister who wrote him letters full of college stories and questions about military life. His father who rarely spoke but whose eyes had shone with pride the day Darius enlisted. Would they understand? Would they know that he'd tried his best? Would they blame him for whatever went wrong tomorrow? Darius squeezed his eyes shut and whispered into the darkness, "I hate you, Brennan. I hate everything about you. If I make it back tomorrow, I'm done. I'm requesting transfer. I'm getting away from you if it's the last thing I do." The words felt good, like poison finally leaving his system. Tomorrow, one way or another, would be the last time Commander Victor Brennan controlled his life. The convoy rolled out at 04 Sudra-hours, headlights cutting through pre-dawn darkness. 4 Humvees carrying 20 soldiers into terrain that belonged more to the enemy than to them. Darius sat in the lead vehicle, rifle across his lap, trying to quiet the hammering of his heart. Commander Brennan rode in the second vehicle. Darius could feel the man's presence like a weight on his shoulders even from 30 feet away. The landscape gradually shifted from barren desert to rocky valleys dotted with mud brick compounds. This was Taliban country. Every shadow could hide a weapon. Every building could contain an ambush. The intelligence report had been specific. Weapons cache in a compound approximately 15 kilometers northeast of their current position. Minimal resistance expected. But intelligence was often wrong. They were 12 kilometers in when Darius saw it, a glint of metal on a ridgeline to the east. Sunlight catching something that shouldn't be there. His mind flashed back to a training exercise 6 months ago. Brennan had made him identify potential sniper positions in a mock village for 6 hours straight. Again, Kwame, where would you hide? Think. Where gives you the best angle and the best escape route? Darius's hand shot up. Contact east, ridge at 2 o'clock. The driver hit the brakes. Soldiers poured out of vehicles taking defensive positions. Nakamura was on the radio immediately calling for reconnaissance. False alarm, Kwame, Nakamura said after 2 tense minutes of observation. There's nothing there. I saw something, Darius insisted, but doubt crept into his voice. Had he panicked? Seen threats where none existed? Get back in the vehicle. Brennan's voice cut through the tension. We're moving. They remounted. Darius felt eyes on his back. The new guy who saw ghosts. The point man who couldn't handle the pressure. But 3 kilometers later, an RPG streaked out of that exact ridgeline and slammed into the third Humvee. The explosion was deafening. The vehicle flipped, tumbling like a toy thrown by an angry child. Fire bloomed orange and black against the morning sky. Screams cut through the ringing in Darius's ears. Contact! Contact! Nakamura was shouting into the radio. RPG from the east, we need medevac now. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions. The ridgeline, a compound to the west, a dried riverbed to the south. They weren't facing minimal resistance. They were facing a coordinated ambush. Darius's training took over. His body moved before his mind caught up, rolling out of the Humvee and taking cover behind the engine block. His rifle came up, sight picture clear, breathing controlled. Another training session echoed in his memory. In an ambush, you have 3 seconds to act before you're dead. 3 seconds, Kwame, react or die. He fired controlled bursts at muzzle flashes in the compound. Soldiers were screaming. Someone was calling for a medic. The smell of burning fuel and cordite filled the air. And then Darius saw him. Commander Brennan moving between vehicles with impossible calm, directing fire, organizing defense, pulling wounded soldiers to cover. The man moved like he'd done this 1,000 times because he had. Kwame, Brennan's voice cut through chaos. Flank west. Take Nakamura and Okonkwo. Clear that compound. Darius didn't think, didn't question. He grabbed Nakamura and Okonkwo and moved, using terrain exactly the way Brennan had drilled into him during those endless night exercises. Low crawl through the riverbed. Use the depression for cover. Watch for crossfire. Count your rounds. Control your breathing. They reached the compound's outer wall. Gunfire still rattled from inside. Nakamura stacked up on the door. Darius suddenly realized he was in charge. He was making the call. Another memory surfaced. Brennan screaming at him during breach training. The first man through the door determines if everyone lives or dies, Kwame. You don't get to be scared. You don't get to hesitate. You decide and you move. On 3, Darius said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. 1, 2, 3. They hit the compound like a storm. Darius's rifle barked. A Taliban fighter dropped. Nakamura took another. Okonkwo covered their 6. Room clear, next room. Movement. Darius fired. The hostile fell. 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. And then silence. Compound clear, Darius reported over the radio, breathing hard. Copy, Brennan's voice came back. Return to the convoy, we're evac. The transmission cut off. A sound Darius would never forget, the sharp crack of an explosion different from an RPG. Closer, more personal. IED, someone screamed over the radio. Vehicle 2, we need help. Darius was running before his mind registered the command. Nakamura and Okonkwo followed. They covered the 200 meters in what felt like seconds and what felt like forever. Vehicle 2 was torn apart. Bodies lay in the dirt. Soldiers were scrambling, trying to pull wounded clear of the wreckage. And there, 20 feet from the destroyed Humvee, lay Commander Victor Brennan. Darius skidded to his knees beside him. The commander's uniform was torn, blood spreading dark across his chest. His eyes were open but unfocused, his breathing shallow and labored. "Medic!" Darius screamed, but he already knew. The nearest medic was with the third vehicle's casualties. They were alone. Brennan's hand gripped Darius's arm with surprising strength. His lips moved, trying to form words. Darius leaned closer. "The letter," Brennan whispered. "My pocket." Then his hand went slack. His eyes went distant, and Commander Victor Brennan, the man Darius Kwame had hated for 18 months, stopped breathing. Darius knelt there, covered in dust and blood, holding a dead man's arm. Around him, chaos continued. Gunfire, shouting, the whine of incoming helicopters. But for Darius, time had stopped. Protocol said to check for dog tags. Protocol said to secure the body and move on. There was still a fight happening. There were still soldiers who needed him. But his hand moved to Brennan's torn uniform pocket anyway. His fingers brushed paper, an envelope, sealed. His name written on the outside in handwriting he recognized from 1,000 corrected reports and failed inspection sheets. Private Darius Kwame, open if I don't make it back, the date written beneath, 3 weeks ago. Darius's hands shook as he tore open the envelope. The firefight continued around him. Nakamura was shouting orders. Okonkwo was laying down suppressive fire, but Darius couldn't hear any of it. He unfolded the letter, and he began to read. "Darius, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you probably hate me. You have every right to. For 18 months, I've made your life hell. I've criticized every move you make. I've pushed you harder than anyone else. I've isolated you, tested you, broken you down, and forced you to build yourself back up. And I've never once told you why. The truth is simple and terrible. I saw myself in you. When I was 23, I was a good soldier. Smart, capable, confident. I thought I had everything figured out. Then came the mission in Fallujah. My commander was killed in the first 30 seconds of an ambush. I was second in command. It should have been my moment to step up, to lead, to prove I was ready. I froze, Darius. For 10 seconds, that felt like 10 years. I froze. And in those 10 seconds, 3 soldiers died. Good men, men with families, men who trusted me to keep them alive. I survived. I was even decorated for the actions I took after I finally unfroze. But I know the truth. 3 men died because I wasn't ready when it mattered most. When you joined my unit, I saw the same qualities in you that I had back then. Skill, intelligence, confidence, and the same critical weakness. You'd never been truly tested. You didn't know if you could lead when everything went to hell. And neither did I. So I tested you. Every single day for 18 months. I put you in impossible situations. I criticized you unfairly. I isolated you from support. I pushed you to the breaking point and then pushed harder. Not because I hated you, because I couldn't let you face what I faced in Fallujah without being ready. Every brutal training session was a scenario you might face in real combat. Every impossible standard was preparation for the moment when good enough isn't good enough. Every time I made you do something alone. I was teaching you to trust yourself when no one else is there to help. I knew you hated me. I accepted that cost. By the time you read this, you've already faced your test. Whatever mission we were on, whatever went wrong, you were ready for it. You made decisions that saved lives. You led when it mattered. You were everything I failed to be. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I'm sorry I couldn't explain. But I learned a long time ago that the lessons that matter most are the ones we learn through struggle, not through explanation. You're going to be a great leader, Darius, not because everything came easy, because nothing did. Don't hate me for what I put you through, or do. Either way, you're ready now. You were always ready. You just needed to know it. Stay alive, lead well, and when you find a soldier who reminds you of yourself, pass it on. Commander Victor Brennan. The letter slipped from Darius's trembling fingers and fell into the Afghan dust beside Brennan's body. Around him, the firefight was ending. Taliban forces were retreating. Helicopters were landing. Medics were rushing between casualties. But Darius couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he'd just read. Every moment of the last 18 months suddenly made horrible, perfect sense. The night navigation drills that taught him to trust his instincts in darkness. The ambush scenarios that trained him to react in 3 seconds. The isolation that forced him to make decisions without depending on others' approval. The physical brutality that taught him pain was temporary, but quitting was permanent. Brennan hadn't been destroying him. He'd been forging him. And Darius had been too blind to see it. "Kwame!" Nakamura dropped beside him, checking him for wounds. "Are you hit? Talk to me." Darius looked at Nakamura with eyes that burned. "He knew," Darius whispered, and he knew this was coming. Knew what was coming? "Kwame, you're in shock. We need to—" "I saw the sniper position," Darius said, his voice growing stronger. 3 clicks back. I called it out. Everyone thought I was paranoid, but I saw it because Brennan trained me to see it. And when the ambush hit, I knew what to do because he'd put me through that exact scenario 100 times. He looked down at Brennan's still face, at the man who had made his life miserable to keep him alive. "He saved me," Darius said. "Every day for 18 months he was saving my life." Nakamura followed Darius's gaze to the letter lying in the dust. He picked it up, read it, and his expression changed. When he looked back at Darius, there was understanding in his eyes. "What do you need?" Nakamura asked quietly. Darius took a shuddering breath, wiped his eyes, and stood up. "I need to finish the mission," he said. "That's what he trained me to do." The weapons cache was exactly where intelligence said it would be. The Taliban had abandoned it when the ambush failed. Darius led a team in to secure it, clear it, and mark it for demolition. He moved with precision and confidence, making decisions that saved time and reduced risk. Every choice he made echoed a lesson Brennan had beaten into his head. When they returned to base 6 hours later, Darius carried 2 things: his rifle and Brennan's letter, carefully folded and placed in his chest pocket right over his heart. The memorial service was held 3 days later. Brennan was eulogized as a great commander, a dedicated soldier, and a man who gave his life in service to his country. The words were true, but incomplete. Darius stood at attention with his unit, tears streaming freely down his face, and said nothing. After the service, Colonel Thaddeus Morse approached him. "Commander Brennan left something for you in his personal effects," the colonel said, handing Darius a small wooden box. "He filed it with the quartermaster 6 months ago with instructions to deliver it to you if he didn't return from deployment." Darius opened the box. Inside was a patch, not regulation, custom made. It showed a hammer striking an anvil with sparks flying. Beneath it, words stitched in silver thread, "Forged under pressure." There was also a note, brief and in Brennan's handwriting: "Wear it when you're ready to train the next one." Darius closed the box, saluted Colonel Morse, and walked back to his barracks carrying the weight of understanding. That night he wrote 2 letters. The first was to his family, explaining that he was okay and that he'd learned something important about sacrifice and leadership. The second was to Corporal Zara Okonkwo, thanking her for her words weeks ago. She had been right. There had been a reason. Over the following weeks, Darius's performance was evaluated. His actions during the ambush were reviewed by senior officers who noted his quick thinking, his effective leadership, and his ability to execute under extreme pressure. He was promoted to corporal and assigned a team of his own. And one day, 3 months after Brennan's death, Darius noticed a young private in his unit. The kid was good, smart, capable, confident, and completely untested. Darius watched him for a week, saw the same qualities he'd once possessed, saw the same potential, and saw the same critical gap between skill and readiness. So Darius began to train him. Harder than the others, with higher standards, with brutal honesty. The private began to look at him with confusion, then frustration, then resentment. Darius saw it and accepted the cost, because he understood now. Some lessons can't be taught gently. Some preparations require pain. Some gifts look like cruelty until the moment you need them most. One evening, Nakamura pulled Darius aside. "You're doing it to him," Nakamura said. "What Brennan did to you, why?" Darius pulled out the patch Brennan had left him. He'd finally sewn it onto his uniform that morning. Nakamura read the words, "Forged under pressure." "Because," Darius said quietly, "the next time we roll into an ambush, I need him to be ready. And the only way to be ready is to be prepared for hell before hell arrives." Nakamura nodded slowly. "Brennan would be proud." "I hope so," Darius said, looking at the young private running laps in the distance, probably cursing Darius's name with every step. "I really hope so." That night Darius sat down and began writing. Not a letter to be read immediately, a letter to be read later. Much later. Only if the worst happened. "Dear Private Elijah Frost, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you probably hate me." The cycle continued. The forge remained hot. And somewhere, Darius hoped, Commander Victor Brennan was resting easy, knowing that the lesson had been passed on. The letter that changed everything wasn't just about the past. It was about the future, about understanding that the hardest lessons are sometimes the most loving, and that sometimes the person who pushes you the hardest is the person who believes in you the most. Darius folded his own letter, sealed it, and placed it in a box with instructions for the quartermaster. Then he went outside to make a young soldier's life miserable, because that's what love looked like when you wore the uniform. That's what preparation demanded. That's what Brennan had taught him. The hammer strikes the anvil. The sparks fly. The metal bends and breaks and reforms stronger than before. That's how warriors are made. Not in comfort, in fire. If you've ever had a teacher, coach, or leader who pushed you to the breaking point and you later realized they were preparing you for your greatest moment, share your story in the comments below. And subscribe to Veterans and Heroes Stories for more true tales of sacrifice, leadership, and the hidden costs of making warriors ready for war.